have a chance.
Chance to what, Adrian? You can, yeah, chat, that's fine. We're now live, we should be recording. Yeah, hello everybody, hello, hello, hello. We're just gonna give you a minute or so for everyone to slowly stream in. But thank you ever so much.
Hello everybody, people are joining.
Yeah, the numbers will go up. Now, hello, hello. Yeah, just say hi in the chat box. Let us know where you are in Poland. Well, everyone's from Poland, so maybe just let us know which city you are from in Poland. While we just give it a couple of minutes for people to arrive. Okay, from Lublin, thank you, Dariusz.
Hello.
From Katowice. I'm not going to try and pronounce them. Adrian, I'll leave that to you.
Katowice, I'll help you.
Katowice. Okay.
Not Katowice.
Okay. I need to be Katowice or something. Oh, that's
try with this one.
Zielona Góra.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can never do Dorota. I can never pronounce that one. Wroclaw.
Yeah.
I find it really hard. Okay, Warsaw I can do. It's easy.
How about Łódź?
Tough. It's tough. Oh, that's a tough one. Jaworzno.
Yes.
Don't laugh. It's mean. Torun.
Yeah, that's right.
Lovely. Okay. Perfect. So what are the numbers up to? We're up to 50. That's a great start, definitely.
Yeah, so I would like to say just a few words to our participants, if you don't mind. Very.
Of course. In Polish?
No, in English.
I don't mind. It's okay, Adrian.
Yeah, maybe in German. Okay, hello, everybody. Thanks for joining today's webinar. As you probably know, we're going to be focusing on English for academic purposes. Some of you maybe have met Alex Warren. So let me read, because I got a lot of information concerning Alex. So very quickly, is a Delta-trained teacher-trainer with over 15 years experience working in ELT as a teacher, academic director, and teacher-trainer. Prior to his experiences in ELT, Alex worked as a journalist before a chance encounter in the Indonesian jungle began him on the path which has led him to working with National Geographic Learning. A firm believer in a communicative approach to language learning and student-centered learning, Alex enjoys working with innovative, thought-provoking materials and presenting on a wide range of ELT-related topics, all the while driven by his passion for developing teachers on a global scale and helping them to reach their true potential. Is this true, Alex?
Absolutely, it's true.
Lovely. Okay, so today we'll try to find out and to explore how to use the so-called real world content and some activities that we can introduce and we can introduce critical thinking activities into our everyday teaching environment. So very up-to-date topic. EAP is something we should be aware of, and we shouldn't be afraid of introducing EAP elements to our English classroom. Okay, so as I said, it's not going to be long. So Alex.
Okay, thank you very much,
If you have any
Adrian.
questions. Yeah, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. Speaking of certificates, we'll tell you later how to get them. Enjoy the webinar now.
Okay. Thank you, Adrian. And thank you once again to all of you for joining me this evening. Let's sort of dive straight in, okay, because we're a little bit late already. So we're talking about stop and think and developing that pathway for our learners to be successful within an academic context. Now that might be tertiary, it might be secondary. I think the skills are valuable whichever kind of area of education we're looking at, whether that's EAP or general English. So in terms of what we're going to cover today, we're going to first of all look at what skills are needed for academic success. which are the ones which are most important to help our learners to achieve the goals that we want them to achieve. And then secondly, we're going to be looking at how we can incorporate this into our everyday teaching to facilitate that process, while not necessarily changing the methodology of our teaching radically. It's just incorporating it in a seamless, easy way. So, a word of warning though, this webinar will be interactive. We will be using the chat box. There will be a couple of polls as well. So your participation is very much appreciated in that respect. So let's just start with a very quick brainstorm activity. So thinking about your students and what they need for success, what 21st century skills do you think are most important to help them achieve that? So in the chat box, please make sure when you're doing the chat box, please make sure it's kind of addressed to all panelists and attendees so that everybody can see your comments, not just panelists, but all panelists and attendees. What 21st century skills do you think are most important for academic success? Let's get some ideas showing. Okay, creativity, lovely. Okay, again, I apologize for pronunciation. Bozena, Yolanta, data literacy, critical thinking, adaptability, lovely. Flexibility, really good ones. Self-development, thank you, Agnieszka. That's a great start. And all of them certainly within my kind of framework. IT skills, yeah, Ivona. Critical thinking, lots of creative thinking coming through. Thank you, Marta and Agnieszka. What else? What else? What else? Okay, recognition of what is useful. And I think that would probably link a little bit to critical thinking, analyzing, being aware of what is useful and what isn't useful. Definitely, Maria. Communication skills, teamwork, Ilona, yes. Ivana, intercultural communication skills, perfect. All of these are on my list. And this is, I should say, it's not my list. It's a list that is taken from the Partnership for 21st Century Learning. So these are kind of the 10 core kind of life academic skills that they have outlined as being important ingredients for academic success. Right, so communication, collaboration we all had, critical thinking, creative thinking, the IT, productivity, accountability, initiative, flexibility, leadership, responsibility, and of course those social and cross-cultural skills, which now more than ever, given what's happened in the last year, are even more important, that ability to be able to work with others from different cultures, different societies. And Yolanta, yeah, as well, emotional intelligence as well. But I think that's less of a skill, I would suggest. So looking at that list of 10, I know you've made some suggestions already which are on the list. I want you to think which 3 you think are the most important for academic success specifically. And we're going to do this as a poll. So I'm going to launch the poll, and all of those items are in the poll, and you can choose 3, okay? So choose the 3 that you think are the most important for academic success from that list. The poll is completely anonymous. There's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. I'll give you a little bit of time. We've got 20% of you have voted. Great. Remember, you can choose 3. Okay, 35 out of 60 have voted. So if you haven't voted, please vote. I'm going to give you another 10 seconds before I end the poll and share the results with you all. And there it is, time up. I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share the results, which I think are not actually overly surprising. So top of the tree is critical thinking with 76% of the vote, of you choosing it, followed by communication with 51%, and then flexibility and adaptability, interesting. Followed then by collaboration and creativity. But you know what? Oh, Adrian can't vote because he's a host. That's fine. I'm glad you chose this one because that's exactly my response to the question. Critical thinking is the most important skill for our learners right now. And again, this is something that the partnership for 21st Century Learning pick up on. In their recent study, critical thinking was identified as the most important skill needed for academic success. And I should also add to that, not just for academic success, but career success as well. Because nowadays, employers are looking for students who've got that ability to think critically about things. Yet, ironically, it is the one skill that they find is most lacking amongst recent graduates. So there's a bit of a sort of discourse between what's expected and what is needed. You know, they want people with critical thinking skills, but they haven't got them. Therefore, there's something that has to be developed throughout their educational experiences, but especially through their kind of higher, you know, the tertiary level of their educational journey, which is where we kind of come into the picture a little bit more. I'm going to stop sharing that. And I think I have another vote for you, another question for you. So based on that then, do you or do you not already incorporate critical thinking into your lessons? So this one's just a quick yes or no vote. Do you currently incorporate them into your lessons? Okay, great. This is good to see. Bam, 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 all the votes coming in. Lovely, lovely. Okay, that's probably enough voting. So yeah, we can see that 85% of you say yes, which is fantastic. 15% says no, but I guarantee that you probably do actually incorporate them. You maybe just don't realize it. Because many coursebooks now do incorporate it as a specific thing within their courses. Okay, another kind of question though, and this one's just for the chat box, is it's related, but I want to know whether you think your students actually have an appropriate level or ability of critical thinking for university study. So you teach it, you know that they need it, but do you think they actually have that ability that they need right now? No, says Dariush. No, no, no. Okay, perfect. And that's true on a global scale. I've talked about critical thinking in Latin America, in Africa, in the Middle East. And the general consensus is that students don't have it, that ability, or they have it, but they maybe not be to the levels in which they need it because of the nature of the educational systems, not allowing them, not giving them the space to have that open mind, to be able to think critically. So before we go into how we can maybe incorporate it more into our classes, I think, of course, we probably need to define what it actually is. What does it entail? I mean, because critical thinking, it involves many, many different things, depending on who you talk to. I told you it's going to be interactive. So again, just in the chat box, what kind of activities do you think involve some kind of critical thinking? Whether that's an activity you do in your class or on a broader scale, what kind of things get your students thinking in a more critical way? So for example, problem-solving tasks is absolutely drawing on those critical thinking skills of your students. Lovely, Ivana, asking lots of why questions. Debate, great, Bozena. Barbara, looking for specific information. Yes, asking questions, all about questions, right? Questions, questions, questions. Question everything, as George Carlin once said. Comparing information from different sources, good. Interpretation, lovely. Data analysis, finding solutions, great, Ivana. Okay, I mean, it's everywhere, right? I mean, here's a small list. Analysis, evaluation, synthesizing, interpreting, questioning, comparing, contrasting, constructing arguments, reflecting on experiences, and learning. So that kind of reflection is a really important feature of it. And, you know, we can't really talk about critical thinking without talking about Bloom's taxonomy. I don't want to spend too long on this at all. I think we're familiar with it, generally speaking, but we're looking at those higher levels of the taxonomy. So maybe a little bit of the apply, but definitely the analyze, differentiating, relating, comparing, contrasting, examining, questioning, testing, evaluating at the top, or on the yellow band. So appraising, arguing, defending, judging. These are all things which we can do within our classrooms. And then, of course, at the top, we've got create. And for me, the idea of creativity and critical thinking, they're really two sides of the same coin. Because to think creatively, you first of all need to have thought critically about something. So the critical thinking leads on to a more creative aspect. And we'll explore that more when we look at the how. Okay. And certainly, you know, I said earlier that for those who said no to the question of do you already incorporate it, you probably do, because a lot of what we do in the classroom will involve some kind of critical thinking. So this is taken from John Hughes and Paul Dummett's book on critical thinking. And things like contrastive analysis, comparing texts, evaluating speakers' intentions, identifying perspective, reflecting on performance. Anything that we do really in a writing class as well, right, can involve some kind of critical thinking. And we'll explore that more when we look at the 4 skills. But here's the question, and it's a question I get asked a lot. Now, everybody understands that critical thinking is important. But they say to me, well, why should we be doing it in our English language class? It's something that they do in their other lessons, whatever it is they might be studying. There will be critical thinking involved in that. Why then should we be adding it to our English language lessons? What are your thoughts on that? Should we be teaching critical thinking in our English lessons? And why? Or, conversely, why not? So again, just in the chat box, share your thoughts with me and with everyone. Okay, so yeah, Agnieszka, that's absolutely right, but that's true of any subject that we're teaching. Why specifically in our English language classes do you think it's important? Okay, yeah, of course, Anna, but why? Why, of course? What is it about the environment of the English language classroom that facilitates or makes it a good place to teach critical thinking? Okay, Derek said maybe it's the only class where this is taught at all, which would be slightly worrying, I think, because it should not be our sole responsibility, because after all, we're language teachers. Okay, good, Barbara. Students know that they're responsible for themselves. Lovely, Maria. The structure of the language requires critical thinking. Exactly, that analysis of vocabulary, of grammar patterns, for example. Great, Anna. To be able to present ideas, join ideas, lovely. So yeah, absolutely, is a big, fat, resounding yes, because it coincides with good language learning. Like we said just now about learning grammar, you know, a great way to learn grammar is through a deductive approach, whereby students are working out rules for themselves, identifying patterns, inferring meaning from context. That all involves critical thinking and problem solving. But it's also language and communication rich, which means it is student focused. It's asking students to express themselves, to share their thoughts, to share their opinions in English, which is maybe something they're not necessarily asked in other subjects that they might be studying. It facilitates communication at the heart of it. And as such, I think it can make for more motivating, more engaging activities for our learners. And that's ultimately what we want, right? It's a driver in the classroom. Because just because someone maybe not have a high level of English does not mean that they are not able to have a high level of cognitive processing. We still want to be able to challenge them on multiple levels, whether that's linguistic levels or cognitive levels, right? but especially within the university context. It is super, super important. And I think this quote sums it up really nicely. Critical thinking is desirable in all aspects of university work because this is what will allow your knowledge and skill to develop and evolve. It's necessary in your reading, note making, assignment writing, tutorial presentations, and for those students whose studies involve a practical component. In other words, it is involved in all of our skills in the classroom. Now that might be implicit, it might be explicit, but it's there. And therefore it is something we should be highlighting, developing as much as we can do. But how? How can we do this in our everyday teaching? So in this section, we're going to look at speaking, writing, reading, and listening, and how we can incorporate critical thinking into those everyday tasks that we do with our students. So first of all, critical thinking and productive skills. What does that actually mean? Well, it means it's getting students to create their own more thoughtful, more authentic discourse. And this is achieved by using critical and creative thinking in the generation of ideas, by reflecting, by evaluating. Okay, so that sounds great. There's lots of words, but how can I do that in practice? So here are some kind of practical ideas that you can use. The first one is a thinking routine called the 3 whys. Not the 3 wise men, just the 3 whys. And this is a thinking routine that nurtures a disposition to discern the significance of a situation or a topic, or even a question, while keeping global, local, and personal connections in mind. So here we have a unit all about protecting the wild. Now, in this case, it's a picture of probably somewhere in Africa, in Kenya, which maybe not be relatable in terms of the animals that they get there, but that does not mean you have animals, they have wild animals where you live, right? So number one of the 3 whys is this. Why might this topic matter to me? So I'm making a personal connection for my students here. I have to think about it, right? It's trying to gauge that significance, determining why something matters, or in fact, determining if it matters and why it matters. And if it doesn't matter, why doesn't it matter? So if your students say, well, this doesn't matter to me, you say, well, why not? Why does it not matter to you? So they still have to think more deeply. It's forcing them to think beyond just the surface of the question. And therefore, I think because of that personal connection, it helps to develop more intrinsic motivation. It makes it more meaningful for them. It gives them a reason to investigate a topic or a theme in a course book on a more personal level. But if that, is the first step, the second step then is, well, why might it matter to people around me? It may not matter too much to me, but it might matter to my family or my friends, or maybe more specifically, my city or my nation or my country, right? So it's thinking on a slightly wider scale. Well, why does protecting the wild matter to Polish people in general, or to the people of Warsaw or Krakow or wherever it is you're from? I'm not going to try and pronounce those names again. So it's linking it, thinking more deeply. And then the third why, you guessed it, is about the world. So why might this topic matter to the world on a global scale? So we're moving from the personal to the slightly less personal to the, maybe, I don't want to say it's impersonal because we're all part of the world, but it's looking at it from a different angle, different perspective. And by providing leading questions, it gets them to think critically. And of course, they reflect on their own initially, and then you're putting them to pairs, putting them to groups, expressing their thoughts, expressing their opinions, and importantly, justifying why. You can't just say because, you have to give a reason for this, right? So this is a really nice thinking routine that we can do at the beginning of a unit of work, or maybe with a reading activity that is about a particular topic. Okay, that's one idea. Another idea we can do for sort of speaking skills, given them thinking more critically, is called see, think, me, we. And it's kind of similar, but it's using a photo to nudge them, to encourage them to talk about the theme or the topic, right? And again, it invites them to make personal connections in the first instance, right? So see, look closely at the photo. What do you notice? So this is, on the surface, this is just lower order thinking skills. What can I see? What do I understand? But then we're going to move that process along a little bit more to get them thinking more deeply about it. So what thoughts do you have about the photo? You tell me in the chat box. What thoughts do you have about the photo? What does it make you think about? Maybe what questions do you have about the photo? What does it make you wonder? Tell me in the chat box. Maybe it makes you think about your impact on the environment. Maybe it's family playing a game. Yeah, maybe they're on holiday. But look more closely. What can you kind of see? I'm going to zoom into the picture for you a little bit. What can you see strewn all? Yeah, maybe they should. I think they should use less. I think it's about pollution of the sea. Good. Thank you, Marta and Barbara. Okay, so once they've done the sort of the thinking about the photo, think about connections. What connections can you make between you and the photo? So they have to look at it more deeply, more closely, and analyze the photograph. Okay, so it's about a family. So I can connect to it in the family. Maybe the mess that they've made, the plastic, the paper, the metals that they are using that maybe are not recyclable. You know, it's about finding those connections and showing them that, you know, in many ways, we are similar as humans wherever we are in the world. And then the we connects it to the global picture, the bigger stories. How might the photo be connected to bigger stories about the world and our place in it? And using the photos as the basis for this is great because students love talking about photos. They love talking about their photos. They can relate to it. They see images everywhere in their life, online, on buses, on billboards. They are the visual generation. Therefore, this kind of task ties in or buys into that knowledge and experience already, but just pushes them that little bit further, the guided thinking task. Another one we can do to get them talking is question starts. And this is a really good activity to get them to create good thought-provoking questions rather than just basic questions. It helps them to develop an inquiring mind. And it helps them to brainstorm different kinds of questions about a topic. You know, it's one thing saying, well, do you have any questions about this photo? But why not give them those questions to help them? So, for example, we might ask them, why? Start questions with why. Start questions with what are the reasons? What if? What if we knew? What would change if? Suppose that. How would something be different if? Oh, we've got two supposes that. What is the purpose of? So in the chat box, I want you to think critically about this photo, this topic of green living. And using one of those question starts, write a question in the chat box for me, please. What questions? Using those question starts. So what are the reasons? So what if we'd never invented plastic, for example? Suppose that we all recycled everything. Suppose that everybody was more aware of the issues or how to live more green life. Okay, I can see some of you typing. I'm just waiting for those questions to come through. Oh, nice, Agnieszka, that's a great question. Suppose we collect all the rubbish for 1 month. Love that. What if we continue to produce more waste? Thank you, Maria. Lovely. And then what this does, it creates debates in the classroom. We might put these on the board, or if we're teaching online, on our interactive whiteboard. And then we can put students into groups or do a class discussion using their questions as the basis for discussion. Nice, Anna. I mean, you could move on, but they, you know, we want to try to make them care, hence why we're trying to make them have that personal connection as well. So always trying to maybe connect it to their lives in the first instance. Okay, another one we can do is called Think, Puzzle, Explore. Again, this gets students to maybe reflect on what they know about a topic. What do you think you know about the topic? Not what you know, but what do you think you know? What questions or puzzles might you have about the topic? And then maybe what does the topic want you or make you want to explore more of? So again, this is a really nice thinking routine just to get them engaging with a theme or a topic of the course book in the first instance. Because I think once you're into a course book, many of them will have specific critical thinking activities. And certainly it's something that we do with Pathways. It is weaved into so much of what we do, even if it's not explicit in task question type. So for example, we've got a really nice activity here all about a desert island, essentially. So we have this imaginary island called Pristine Island. And it got a couple of questions. Why do you think land birds are decreasing? Why are the trees endangered? Tell a partner. So I'm going to ask you to quickly read the text. I'm hoping it's big enough for you. If not, I can zoom in a little bit, I think. Let's give that a go. Maybe not. So read the text and tell me why you think the land birds are decreasing. Why are the trees endangered? Now, the information may not be in the text, but you use your existing knowledge, your awareness of the world. In other words, you're thinking critically about the questions. Please do share any suggestions in the chat box. Lovely, Ivana. Yeah, maybe there's too many tourists are coming. Maybe they are building too many hotels or things. Therefore, they're cutting down the trees. Exactly. The amount of chemicals in the seawater, great Agnieszka. I mean, there are a multitude of answers. We don't know what the exact answer is, but that's kind of the beauty of it. It's getting students to think. It's not an obvious answer. Well, what could it be, is what we're asking, essentially. So great, thank you for those answers, ladies. And then with this particular reading, we kind of move it on a little bit. You know, we have here working in groups. Imagine you're in charge of developing Pristine Island for residences and businesses, and you want to impact wildlife as little as possible. Discuss how the factors in the charts could impact wildlife. Write notes in the chart. So again, you're thinking, well, okay, if we build new roads, how will that impact on wildlife? Tourists on beaches, residential areas, high-rise hotels. What is the impact on all of these things from tourism and from developing the island? There's no one answer. There's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. But they have to think more deeply about it. And it's a really nice communicative activity. So that's kind of what I was saying earlier about critical thinking. It drives communication, meaningful communication between the students. And then with this particular lesson, we finish it off by getting them in their groups to discuss solutions to any of the issues that they've identified. So they're going full circle, right? They've thought critically about why development might impact on these things, or these things might impact on wildlife. But then also, well, how can we make sure that it doesn't? What are the solutions? Choose 3 that you could think could be effective, share them with the class. Communication, 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 driven by critical thinking. So essentially, this is a problem-solving task, right? But they're brainstorming, they're applying. Another example here, taken from the same unit on urban development. And specifically, it's all about the MOSE project in Venice. But initially, you know, we get students to answer the following question. What urban challenges does a city you know face? So again, remember, it's starting with the personal, with them, and not saying, well, what issues face New York or Mexico City or Bangkok or wherever it is. It's all about your city. Take a minute to prepare and 2 minutes to present your answer. And it's using specific language. So they have to think critically about how it relates to them, right? And I'm sure all of us could make some kind of comment about the cities that we live in terms of urban challenges that we face. Overpopulation, environmental issues, you know, the list goes on. And then we get them to look specifically at this example case where, you know, they have to summarize the important features. So to do that, they're thinking critically. They have to analyze the infographic and the text and decide, well, what is the most important information? And then in exercise E, they are explaining why they think it's going to stop the floods or not. What other defenses can cities use to prevent flooding? So it's critical thinking, there's creativity. Two sides of the same coin. And it's just a really simple little activity. One more example here. I mean, this is a really common one that most coursework will do. It'll just be that agree, disagree, right? Working with partners, read the statements related to different urban issues. Do you agree or disagree with each? Why? So this is, why is this the key question to all critical thinking? Why? Why do you think that? Why do you say that? So for example, it's impossible for people from different ethnic groups to live together in peace. Do you agree or disagree? Why not? They have to explain themselves. They have to, first of all, reflect and then rationalize, explain why. That's critical thinking. And then this particular lesson, it finishes with a little presentation, presenting a problem and solution. Problems and solutions, that is all about critical thinking. Discuss problems affecting a city you are both interested in. So it's giving students choice. It might be their city, it might be the capital city, it might be a city that they've been to on holiday. Make a list, use your knowledge and experience, research the city, present it, propose solutions. It's communicative, it's collaborative, it's critical thinking, it's creativity. All of those 21st century skills in one, but driven by critical thinking. Okay, jump that bit. Okay, let's move on to critical thinking and writing. So, have a quick look at this question. So these are lots of different genres of writing that you might find in any course book, whether that's general English or academic. Which one of these writing genres do you think doesn't involve critical thinking? And write your answer in the chat box for me, please. So you've got summary, story, article, reports, emails, essays of different kinds. Which of these do not involve critical thinking? Okay, Marta, I think, is thinking critically by saying none. See, I'm getting you to think critically here, right? Maria says a report, essay, summaries. Okay, yeah, good. Many of you have got the right answer. They all include critical thinking. It was a trick question, so well done to those who were not tricked by my deceitful tactic. They all involve critical thinking because process writing is all about critical thinking in many respects. So based on that then, what are those steps of writing? So when you're doing a writing class, what's the first thing that you might do with your learners? What's step one of a writing process? Tell me in the chat box. What do we do? I'm going to help you. We start off by brainstorming, right? We brainstorm. What do we do after we've brainstormed as a process writing lesson? Okay, we might present the topic. Yeah. Thank you, Marta. But we brainstorm the topic, then we are going to select. Okay, I'll take that as an answer. We create the outline, right? We select what we want from our brainstorm and put it into our outline. We plan it, right? Exactly. Thank you, Ivana. Select content, plan what you want to say, that outline. We then write the task, write the essay or the article or whatever it might be. We revise and edit it, and then we publish it, our final draft. So essentially, we've got 5 steps of the writing process. Now, What we have to consider now, though, is how many of these steps actually involve critical thinking. And I would argue most of them do. Okay, brainstorming is a creative thinking process. But equally, we might say it involves some critical thinking as well, because we have to decide which ones involve, which one are we going to use in our essay, which kind of comes into the outline. The outline is the critical. We are deciding what to include, what not to include. We're writing the task, which is mainly creative, but I'd also argue there is critical thinking as well. We have to think about how we're going to say certain things. Revising and editing is all about critical thinking. We're assessing our own piece of work or a classmate's, right? We're saying, okay, that's a good idea. That might need help, but it's critical thinking. It's analysis, it's evaluation. And then we are publishing, which is both a critical and a creative process. So yeah, Maria, maybe not all of them, but most of them, right? So of course, there are different ways to approach writing lessons. We have the product writing or genre writing approach or the process writing approach. For me, the fact that the process writing approach does all of these things and develops those other skills while being communicative make it a preferable approach in the classroom. It makes it more interactive for all students involved. So, here's an example taken from Pathways. We've got the goal. The goal is to write an opinion essay on the following topic. So in groups, make a list of things that individuals, businesses, or governments can do to ensure a sustainable future. Use these ideas from the reading passages or your own ideas. Fine. Then we have the brainstorming, the planning section of that, right? Or the brainstorming and the planning. Then we have, they write it, but then we give them a sort of process to review and revise their essay. In other words, the critical thinking. There's a step-by-step process for them through which we are guiding them at every step. And just another example of that, it might be that we're just doing a pros and cons list for a advantages and disadvantages type essay. So everyone should start learning a second language at the age of 3. What are the pros? What are the cons? That argument-led approach, which is really popular in any kind of international, well, within first exam, within IELTS, within the advanced exam, as well as national or standardized university exams. Really, really common. It's all about critical thinking. But you knew that already. Writing is a critical process, as well as being a creative process. Let's move on quickly then to critical thinking and reading. Which I think for many people, they think critical thinking, they think reading. It is a natural fit. But what does it actually mean? Well, being part of a critical thinker is being a critical reader. If you read uncritically, you may accept texts and arguments which are flawed, biased, and subjectively written. Reading critically will help to make sure that your study and research activities continue as soundly as possible. Therefore, it's our job to ensure that they're doing it correctly. But what is critical thinking and reading? Well, I've got another question for you. Here is a list of activities that we might do with a text. Now, all of them involve critical thinking, apart from one, okay? This is not a trick question, okay? This is not a trick question. Which one does not involve critical thinking? So use your critical thinking hat, put it on, and tell me the answer to the question in the chat. Maria, I would argue not all of them this time around, although we could argue it, to be honest with you. We could argue the answer. But yeah, all of them do, apart from one. It's not, I promise you, it's not a trick question. Okay, we have an answer. Well done, Katarzyna, I think is the pronunciation there. You are right, it is answering exam questions. Because answering exam questions is, okay, it does depend on the exam question, first of all. We could argue that. But generally, exam questions are checking one thing and one thing only. And that is comprehension. That is understanding. It's identifying factual information, if it's true or false. multiple choice answers, gap fill answers. That does not necessitate critical thinking. It's just basic understanding of a text, basic comprehension, that lower order thinking skills. It's an important skill, don't get me wrong, but it's not critical thinking. Okay, so let's look at some practical ways in which we might do this with a text. So imagine we are doing this text all about happiness. And the question is there a recipe for happiness? And of course, for this particular lesson, you might start off by asking that question to your students. Well, what do you think? Do you think there's a recipe for happiness? Why? Why not? It's a good start. But another way to start a reading lesson, and one which I find really useful for my learners, is with a KWL chart activity. So we start off with a K. What do I already know about the topic? So it's reflecting. What do I want to know about, also what do I already know about this topic of happiness and the recipe for happiness? So I think the recipe for happiness might be having a loving family, having good friends, eating nice food, whatever it might be. We all have different answers to that question, and that's great. The W, what do I want to know about this topic? And this is maybe more critical thinking here. But what do I want to know about the recipe for happiness? Why does X, Y, Z make me happy? Or why is it involved in the recipe for happiness? And what the students are doing here, essentially, they're writing their own questions for the text. In other words, they are personalizing the reading activity. They're not reading it to answer basic comprehension questions. They're reading it to find out what they want to know. And I think that's really powerful and motivating for learners, making those connections. It gives them a purpose, a real world purpose for reading an article. And then at the end of the reading, we come back to it, and the L, what did I learn about the topic, about the theme, about the article? So it's reflection on what they learned. And I think that kind of post-reading stuff is really important. And we'll do some examples of some reflection activities in a moment. Okay, so with this particular reading, there are sort of inbuilt critical thinking tasks, right? So predicting, we do this all the time. Most reading, what do you think the text is going to be about? What words might appear? What do you think the photos are suggesting about the text? So that's critical thinking. This is kind of critical thinking. What is the main idea of the reading passage? So you're reading it and you're analyzing it, you're evaluating it for yourself. Well, what is the main message of it? And we give them a choice in this case. Maybe there is no choice. Well, what do you think is the main idea, the main message? Okay, granted, we've not read this article, but maybe the main message is happiness means different things to different people. Maybe it is personal freedom. Maybe it's that need to feel safe and secure in order to be happy. But you have to not only understand the text, basic comprehension, you need to be able to read between the lines, identify the purpose of the text. Then we have some more kind of critical thinking specific activities, inferring meaning from context for vocabulary, and then justifying an opinion. So they've read the text, it's all about Singapore and Mexico. Where would you prefer to live? Why? Complete the following sentence and share your ideas. I think I prefer to live in Singapore or Mexico because. Now, I could ask you to answer that question, but you've not read the text, so you're not fully aware of all the facts and information. It would just be a personal preference. You wouldn't have the evidence to back it up. So here, we're getting them to evaluate the evidence. Well, I prefer to live in Singapore because X, Y, Z. Or I prefer to live in Mexico because of A, B, C. But it's involving them. It's making that connection to the text. Okay, a couple of other post-reading tasks we could do. 3, 2, 1. And these are all based about reflection, okay? Three things that you found most interesting or most surprising about the text. Why? Remember, it's always why. And this is such a simple routine that we can do. You could maybe 3 things that you already knew in the text, or 3 words that you learned from the text, or 3 things that you didn't believe in the text. Why not? That's okay, you can change it around. 2 things you still want to know, or 2 things you still want to find out more about, and why. So maybe I learned a little bit about Singapore and the kind of lifestyle that they have there. I want to learn more about life in Singapore, or more about life in Mexico, or maybe more about the bands in Mexico, whatever it might be. And then one I really like to do for my students to really get them thinking is this one. One thing that you would like to fact check. And this is an important thing to get students to do, because there's so much fake news out there nowadays that you have to make sure that what you're reading is actually true. A, that you can trust the source, and B, that you can trust what is written. So just because an article says something, can I really believe it? Okay, in this case, it's an article taken from a National Geographic Learning book based on an article from National Geographic, which we know are reliable sources. But nonetheless, I might still want to fact check this information about Singapore or Mexico. And it's just a really simple activity we can do. They can just go on their phones, find out really quickly. Another really nice activity I like doing is called the 4 C's. Now, this is not the 4 C's of the 21st century skills. It's not critical thinking, creativity, communication, and collaboration, although the activity does involve those things. It's more about the kind of the reflection topics. So the first one is all about connections. What connections can you draw between the text and your own life or other learning? So it's synthesizing information, which we saw earlier on Bloom's taxonomy, is one of those higher order thinking skills under evaluate and analyze. The second C is challenge. What ideas, positions, or assumptions do you want to challenge or argue within the text? In other words, what are you questioning? What don't you maybe believe, and why? What do you want to find out more information about? Why? Because we don't want students to believe everything they read. So it's a bit like the fact check activity just now. You want them to question, to make sure what they're reading is truthful. The third C is concepts. What key concepts or ideas do you think are important and worth holding onto from the text? And I should say, for all of these things, students will have different opinions and different views, and that's great, because we want them to share those views and opinions with each other. So just because I think this idea is worth holding on to does not mean you have to agree. Well, I think this is really important because I am justifying my viewpoint. Tick for critical thinking. So look, we've got 3 C's there: connections, challenge, concepts. What do you think the 4th C might be? Tell me in the chat box, what might the 4th C be? Any guesses? Okay, we've all gone quiet. Okay, context, good idea, Agnieszka, really good one. Checking, thank you, Anna. Also, yes, conclusion, Maria, good guess. And I think, Maria, you're probably closest there with conclusion. Because while it's not called conclusion, it kind of has that element to it. It's about changes. And by changes, we mean what changes in attitude, thinking, or even action are suggested by the text, either for you or others. In other words, has it made you think differently about something? Has it made me think about doing something differently? Having that change of opinion or thoughts about something. Because I'm sure we've all read or we've all watched something that has had an impact on us and made us change our views on something. That maybe previously you knew only a little bit about Singapore and it was quite negative. But once you've read the article, you might, okay, well, I've changed my view on Singapore. Maybe it would be a really nice place to live. Or vice versa with Mexico City. Okay, one more kind of post-reading activity is called interview the author or the character in the story. And again, this just gets students going beyond just basic comprehension. they've had to understand the author or the character's viewpoint within the article. So in pairs, imagine you're going to interview them. How has your, or what 5 questions would you like to ask them? It shows a deeper understanding of the text. There's not just writing comprehension questions about the text, because that's something that we do all the time. It's not really critical thinking. That's just creating a question. This is more critical thinking, because asking, well, what would you like to ask the author about what they've written? Maybe you'd like to ask them, well, which one would you prefer to live in and why? And so on. We're not going to get the answer to those questions, but it's just that process that we're going through. And that kind of leads on to the final task with reading I want to talk about. And it's called, I used to think, now I think. So here we've had a whole unit all about happiness. And within the unit, they've done 2 quite substantial readings about what happiness is and the recipe for it, etc. How has that changed? Well, I used to think this about happiness. Now I think this about happiness. So it's a thinking routine that helps them to reflect on their thinking about a topic or an issue, but also to explore how and why that thinking has changed. And as such, it can be really useful in consolidating new learning, because the students identify their new understandings and opinions and beliefs. Because by examining and explaining how and why their thinking has changed, it develops their reasoning abilities and recognizing causal relationships between things. So that's a great article, or great activity to do at the end of a unit of work that's been thematically linked. Okay, so just to sum up reading really, I want to sum up this quote here. Don't just teach your students to read, teach them to question what they read. Teach them to question everything. And critical thinking does that at the heart of it. Okay, last hurdle, last 5 minutes. Critical thinking and listening. Now, this is probably the hardest one that people try to implement, because it is tricky. Well, how can we do critical thinking and listening? What is it even? What is it? Here's the answer. Critical listening rather, occurs when you still want to understand what the other person is saying, but also have some reason or responsibility to evaluate what is being said to you and how it is being said. And this is true, because I say this to my daughter all the time. I don't say, it's not what you say, it's how you say it, actually. Thank you is very different to thank you or thank you. So, you have that element to it as well as actually, evaluating what they're saying. Are they trying to confuse you by big words and long sentences? What is the real message there? So, looking at that on a practical basis, what kind of critical thinking tasks can we encourage students to do while listening? Is it something that you've done before? Tell me in the chat box. Try and answer that question. What kind of critical thinking tasks can we encourage students to do while listening? And just while you're thinking about that, Maria, you're absolutely right. It is a challenge for your students. Of course it is, but it's a process. It's something that we introduce and we build on, because they have to do it at some point, right? To develop these skills. Otherwise, they're just not going to develop them. So it might be in the first instance, it might be 1 question or 2 questions, and you support them with that process. It's not going to happen overnight. Of course it's not. It's a gradual process. And certainly the activities we've looked at today, you wouldn't be doing all of these in one go. You introduce them gradually. Bearing in mind the ones I'm sharing with you, they're ones which are in the book, as well as my own ideas on top of that as well. Okay, so no ideas for critical thinking and listening. Okay, thank you, Ivona. Perfect. What mood are the students in? How would you answer the question when they're listening? Good. Is the person telling the truth or lying? Lovely. So let's have a tone of voice. Attitude. Lovely. Here's a list here. They're listening for inferences. They're saying this, but what do they actually mean? Listening for purpose, listening for attitude, listening for tone. So like Marta and Agnieszka are pointing out there. Thinking about questions while listening. So for example, with that one, something I often do is I'll pause the listening task and I'll say, okay, what questions have you got about what he's just said? What would you like to know more about? Note-taking is critical thinking because you have to decide what information you should be note-taking. And that is a key academic skill. Identifying the key information, much like it is with reading. And then also maybe reflecting on what's been said. But it is tricky to do, but it's something that we do incorporate into the kind of the heart and soul of the listening strand of pathways. So in this case, it's the purpose of critical thinking is listening a speaker's, understanding a speaker's purpose. So understanding why a speaker says something can help you better understand his or her ideas. In some cases, a speaker might say explicitly, my point here is whatever, I'm mentioning this because. But sometimes that's not really the case. So here we give them some practice. So we listen to some excerpts from the podcast in this case, choose the correct answer. Why does he say this? So they listen, why does he say it? Is it A or B? Is it to give an example or is it to point out? Again, why does Kenny say this? Is it to argue something or is it to suggest something else? Why has he said it? Another example here. This one is all about listening for inferences. So we get students to listen to 3 excerpts from the lecture. What do they actually mean by it? Because maybe what they're saying isn't always that clear. What are they actually suggesting? In other words, like with reading, is reading between the lines. And then the last example I want to share is the one about tone, or recognizing attitude through the intonation that the people are using, or the tone of voice that they're using, right? So I want to try and do this. I'm not sure it's going to work or not, but we're going to listen to 4 people speaking. And I want you to tell me if they are feeling confident, thoughtful, surprised, or uncertain. And this is going to be your final task for today, okay? So hopefully this works.
1.
Well, I can't say that's always true, but to some extent, yes.
Oh, okay. That's number 1. Were they confident, surprised, thoughtful, or uncertain? Tell me in the chat box. Okay, Laurie said thoughtful. Okay, let's listen to the other ones and see.
1.
But to some extent, yes.
2. Don't take this the wrong way, but isn't that obvious? Nobody likes getting bumped after all.
Okay, what about him? What do we think for him? Is he uncertain, confident, thoughtful, or surprised? Hey, yeah, good, Barbara. He was confident. Okay, number 3. This might change your views and opinions.
3. Huh. It makes sense that stores would do that, I guess, but I hadn't ever considered it before.
Okay, what about him? Surprised, maybe. A lot of C's, yeah. So I think he's more thoughtful, right? I think A was uncertain, or number 1 was uncertain, which means number 4 should be, well, let's find out.
4. So you're saying that stores are trying to alter how we behave in order to encourage us to spend more?
How's he feeling? Yeah, he is surprised. You know, and how do we know they're feeling confident, thoughtful, surprised, uncertain? It's all about that tone of voice. The intonation tells us. But that's really, really hard for our learners to identify, which is why they need that practice. Okay, let's just sum all of that up. Okay, pity there's no distractor. Yeah, that's true. That is true. Okay, that would need even more critical thinking. So, develop our students' academic readiness by trying to integrate critical thinking tasks into the traditional 4 skills of reading, writing, listening, and speaking, alongside those other 21st century skills, which are necessary. And just a final quote I want to leave you with. I think it's completely relevant, from Albert Einstein. Education is not about learning the facts, but training the brain to think. And I think if we're going to take anything away from today, that's what we have to do. Yes, we are teaching the English language. We're developing those language skills. But a language skill is also the ability to think in that language. So take some time to think about that. Take some time to reflect. I want you to think critically as well about the session. What 3 things could you do more of or start to do to incorporate more critical thinking into your everyday teaching? Okay, thank you ever so much for your time, for your patience, for your attention and participation. Really appreciate it. Today we've been talking all about pathways, and for more information, you can contact my colleague at Nova Era or National Geographic Learning Poland, Adrian Rostowski. I can't even pronounce your name, Adrian. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I'm laughing again, but I love the way you
But for more information, you can also go to the website. I'm going to put it in the chat box for you quickly before I go back to the slide with Adrian's details. eltngl.com/pathways series. You can find out more information there. And there are Adrian's contact details once again.
Thanks a million, Alex. Thank you all for joining this webinar. I hope you find it interesting and useful. And Alex, do you mind if I close the meeting just saying a few words in Polish?
Of course you can, absolutely.
Very quickly, ogłoszenia parafialne. Raz jeszcze dziękuję Państwu za udział w tym dzisiejszym spotkaniu. Jeżeli chodzi o certyfikaty, to oczywiście będą one wysłane do Państwa na adresy mailowe, które Państwo nam podali. O Pathways teraz nie chciałbym mówić, że jest to 5-poziomowy kurs poziomu A, mniej więcej do poziomu C1, że mamy 2 ścieżki, listening and speaking and critical thinking i reading and writing and critical thinking. Jeżeli będą Państwo zainteresowani wprowadzeniem tej pozycji u siebie na uczelniach, jeżeli rzeczywiście ktoś trwa w prywatnej szkole językowej, to oczywiście taka możliwość też jak najbardziej istnieje. Chodzi o zawartość tej książki, co właściwie nam taki kurs Pathways daje w nauczaniu. To proszę zwrócić się do mnie mailowo najlepiej ze wskazaniem uczelni oraz adresu do wysyłki wybranego poziomu egzemplarza okazowego kursu Pathways. Mamy również dostępne kody dostępu, masło maślane, do e-booków. Naprawdę, mówiąc kolokwialnie, bardzo wypasione e-booki, także chociażby w kontekście nauczania hybrydowego czy samego online'owego, oby już nam to się nie zdarzyło, czego Państwu i sobie serdecznie życzę, bo się już naprawdę za wszystkimi stęskniłem. To mamy te w postaci e-booków dostępne również Students Booki Pathways. Tam jest oczywiście wiele elementów dodanych do tego, co jest dostępne online. Natomiast jeśli chodzi o zestawy lektorskie, to w przypadku, kiedy Państwo zdecydują się na korzystanie z tego kursu w przyszłym roku akademickim, również proszę być w kontakcie ze mną. Wszyscy zostaną obsłużeni, wyposażeni, narzędzia do pracy są nam potrzebne, bez żadnych kosztów. Będzie to Państwu z wielką przyjemnością przekazane. No i myśląc o naszych kochanych studentach, oczywiście też nie zapominamy, że portfel nie pęka w szwachu takiego studenta, więc chcielibyśmy, żeby książki te, a Students Book jest razem z kodem dostępu do platformy MyELT, którą mogą Państwo zarządzać. Tam są ćwiczenia, dodatkowy materiał do zadawania czy do pracy samodzielnej w przypadku studentów. To żeby kupić taniej, student musi mieć kod rabatowy. On jest do realizacji li i wyłącznie w sklepie NG Learning. nie w sklepie Nowej Ery, bo często zdarza się tak, że wracają Państwo do mnie z informacją, że studenci jęczą, że kod nie działa, a gdzie weszli? A do sklepu Nowej Ery. No nie do końca. To jest NGL, ja za ten teren jestem odpowiedzialny, także sklep.nglearning.pl, ale to już potem. Także wszyscy mogą sobie kupić taniej, jest bezpłatna wysyłka. No chcemy jak najbardziej przyspieszyć proces wyboru, potem zakupu książki, żeby ta książka była jak najszybciej w rękach studenta. Także nie przedłużam, bo już tak Alex Państwa przytrzymał. Yeah, that was your fault that it's 7:10. So
yeah, my apologies.
Thank you once again for joining us, for being here. Have a nice holiday, and I hope to see you again face to face in September, October, or even earlier. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Thank you, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Stay safe. Thank you.
Yes, stay safe.